Welcome, folks. Welcome to the live stream today. If you are in the chat and want to share where you're joining us from today as folks get on, we will be here for a moment, just letting folks join us and get ready for a great presentation today. I want to welcome all the folks who have tuned in already and those who are going to be joining us as we go forward. Welcome. I'm seeing we have some folks from on the West Coast from Oregon. Welcome to you, and welcome to everyone who's joining us right now. We'll give you a minute to hop on and get settled in. We have a wonderful presentation today, and would love for you to let us know as you get on where you're joining us from. And as you all do that, I will get started here. Welcome to our live stream. We are joined and will be joined by folks from all across the country for a conversation about oil and gas issues, from community impacts to climate, oil and gas extraction, pipelines, and the end use, whether it's in transportation or to make chemicals and plastics or for export. This is an issue that affects all of us. And I want to thank you all for joining this important conversation today, and to welcome some folks from California to the conversation. As we're getting settled and folks are jumping on, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, let folks know, let me know, let our other panelists know where you're joining us from, and just a welcome. Thank you for being here. It's great to have you. We have an excellent set of folks who are going to share a little bit more with us about how oil and gas impacts their communities and what we can collectively do to stop it. I'm seeing folks joining from South Carolina, Chicago, other folks from Denver, New York. Welcome, everybody. Please keep putting where you're joining us from in the chat. And while you're doing that, while you're introducing yourselves, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Kathy Collentine, and I work at the Sierra Club as the Associate Director for our oil and gas work. That's the work that's done with our Beyond Dirty Fuels campaign. I use she and her pronouns, and I live on the land of the Arapaho, Ute, and Cheyenne people in Denver, Colorado. And as many of you know, here in Colorado, oil and gas pollution is impacting us in many ways. When I travel north from my home here in Denver, along the roadside, it's dotted with houses and with fracking wells, sometimes within just feet of each other or of schools. The air pollution from those wells and the networks of pipelines they link to contribute to the bad air quality days that are in my neighborhood and that happen across our state. Within 2 miles of my house are train tracks. They're traveled by oil tank cars, among other trains, on a regular basis. Less than 20 minutes from my house, tar sands, which is oil extracted up in Alberta, Canada, brought here by pipe, the same oil that the now canceled, thank goodness, let's celebrate, the now canceled Keystone XL pipeline would have carried, where it's refined. And the impacts on my community's health and safety are air and water and the climate. And this is in a state that experiences flooding, it experiences drought, and we experience wildfire, sometimes all in the same year. And that reality continues to spur me to join with my community and with folks all across the country in order to rise up and stop the expansion of the oil and gas industry, of oil and gas infrastructure, of oil and gas pipelines. With the Sierra Club, and likely with many of you on the call today, I fought the Keystone XL pipeline, a project that was canceled on day one of the Biden administration. I continue to be engaged in the fight against another tar sands pipeline, Line 3 in Minnesota. It connects to a network of pipelines that run through my home state of Wisconsin. And that includes Line 5. That network includes Line 5, which goes via the Straits of Mackinac into Michigan. And so I join with those here in this call who are part of those who are calling to shut that down. The Sierra Club is part of a powerful and growing movement. This movement is led by those most impacted by these projects. And the Sierra Club and I join in the call for leadership at all levels to put an end to the expansion of oil and gas infrastructure. I'm so happy to be with you here today. So happy to see so many of you on this call, and I hope that you will join us in this call to action. Many of the folks on this call, I would imagine, are already part of your community's efforts to stop oil and gas extraction, infrastructure expansion, and export. I know a lot of you have been introducing yourselves in the chat, but if you want to also share, what work are you a part of across the movement? Are there some oil and gas projects that you are fighting to stop, or that you've been a part of the fight to stop? I've named a couple that are important to me. And as you put a little bit in there, and I'll check the comments and speak some of those into the room, but please scroll through and take a look at who's here. And are there projects in there that you're also working on? Build those connections. It's a powerful movement and a powerful community. But I want to share a little bit about the Sierra Club's Beyond Dirty Fuels campaign while those come in the chat, and the oil and gas work that we do before we hear from our panelists. We are engaged in fights with local communities and partners along what we call the Frack cycle. So I've talked about extraction in my community, the transportation that happens via pipeline, and then the end use or the export. And we know that the oil and gas industry continues to try to expand to new markets. And this is at a time when we need to be moving away from fossil fuels. The science is clear, and the oil and gas industry is trying to build massive export terminals that will give them access to new markets overseas. But we can't just export our pollution. Whether it's in the Permian Basin of Texas and New Mexico, the Bakken oil fields in North Dakota, the Marcellus Shale in Pennsylvania, here in Colorado in the Denver-Julesburg Basin, communities bear the impacts of fracking and extraction near their homes, near their schools, in their communities, of pipelines that leak in waterways or emit climate impacting methane. The Sierra Club, with the help of many of you, is part of a movement that is fighting back against the expansion of this infrastructure. And going over to the comments here, thank you everybody who has been introducing themselves, working on, I see renewable energy in here. I see folks who have been fighting power plants that are moving from coal but now want to use gas. How are they going to get that gas? We're talking about pipelines. I know y'all are fighting those as well. I want to just appreciate and lift up all of the work that you all are doing with us. Please keep sharing the things that you're doing, the fight against the Mariner East pipeline. Thank you for being a part of that. And keep sharing those, keep connecting with each other in the chat. That's as much for you as it is for me. I want to turn us in our conversation to invite Mahiyarsuru, who is a movement leader and the Sierra Club's Deputy Legislative Director on the federal policy team covering oil and gas issues, to join me. Hi there, Mahiyar.
Hey, how's it going?
It's good. It's good. Welcome. I'm wondering if you can just take a moment to introduce yourself and give us a sense of how oil and gas has impacted your community.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. And hi, everyone. My name is Mahiyarsuru. I'm a Deputy Legislative Director with the Federal Policy Team and work most closely with the Beyond Dirty Fuels campaign. I use she, her pronouns and live in Washington, D.C., the Anacostia and Piscataway lands. While I currently live in DC, I'm originally from Minnesota, Dakota land, and have spent the last 7 years fighting tar sands pipelines, starting back in 2014 with the proposed expansion of Enbridge's Alberta Clipper and Sandpiper pipelines, and now with the Line 3 pipeline, a massive tar sands pipeline proposed in northern Minnesota, a project that threatens my home state and the drinking water of more than 20 million people who live downstream of the Mississippi River. And you know, this week, this month, and these last few months, when I think about Earth Day and how we can create a more livable planet for all, it means that ensuring that Black and Brown and Indigenous communities who are most impacted by the climate crisis have access to clean air and clean water. Creating this livable planet also means ending police brutality. Ending environmental racism that is perpetuated by these fossil fuel infrastructure projects goes hand in hand with ending police brutality and the fight for racial justice. You know, in my home state of Minnesota, from the murder of Jamar Clark to Philando Castile to George Floyd and so many others who have been murdered by the police, we cannot address the climate crisis without ending police brutality, white supremacy, and ending the extractive fossil fuel industry that is polluting and harming communities. communities. So thank you for the opportunity to be here with all of you today to share more about the work that we're doing in DC and how we're fighting to stop the expansion of the fossil fuel industry, not only within the walls of Congress, but with the Biden administration, and how we can build back fossil free.
Welcome. Thank you for that introduction and for speaking into this space, so many of the intersections of our movements. So Mahir, this week, President Biden gave his first joint address to Congress. And in this address, the president spoke about prioritizing the climate crisis, the introduction of the American Jobs Plan, and the unveiling of his American Families Plan. One thing we heard President Biden say is that when he hears climate change, he hears jobs, jobs, jobs. We know that President Biden must build back better, but what does it mean to build back fossil free?
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. So, to me, building back fossil free means we must end the build out and expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure projects. And while we are doing so, we must end the subsidizing of the fossil fuel industry. The federal government pays $15 billion each year in direct federal subsidies. And that doesn't even include the billions of dollars they spend in indirect subsidies to the fossil fuel industry. And instead of spending billions of dollars propping up an industry that is polluting our communities, we must build back better by investing in plugging thousands of abandoned and orphaned oil and gas wells and create thousands of union jobs along the way. As of 2016, the EPA estimated there were over 2 million active, idle, orphaned, and abandoned, but unplugged onshore wells across the United States. Remediating around 500,000 of those wells could create over 250,000 high-quality jobs over the next 5 years. These jobs can be good-paying, shovel-ready jobs with strong labor standards in the same regions that are likely to be heavily impacted by the transition away from fossil fuels. And President Biden has proposed in his American Jobs Plan an immediate upfront investment of $16 billion to put hundreds of thousands to work in union jobs, plugging oil and gas wells, restoring and reclaiming abandoned coal, hard rock, and uranium mines. But we also know that the oil and gas industry is a boom and bust cycle. So while we're ensuring that the oil and gas industry fulfills their legal obligations to cover the cost of remediation now into the future, that must include strengthening bonding requirements, instituting fees on idled wells, and on oil and gas production. And plugging wells is not only a job creator, it would drastically reduce the amount of methane pollution that impacts communities all across the country. The EPA estimates that roughly over 2 million unplugged abandoned wells release over 276,000 metric tons of methane per year, which is equivalent to 7 million metric tons of carbon dioxide, or the annual emissions from 1.5 million passenger vehicles. It's a lot.
That's huge. And I know in my community here, it's an issue that we're dealing with on the state level here in Colorado, the issue of tens of thousands of abandoned wells located here. And our state doesn't even compare to the number that we're seeing in other places that have had extraction for a long time. It's a big issue. And I'm grateful to hear that President Biden is taking action. Now, focusing in on methane a little bit, methane pollution, Congress took a step this week to reinstate methane pollution safeguards. Can you talk a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, so this week the Senate passed the Methane Congressional Review Act resolution of disapproval. So basically, when both the House and the Senate and the presidency are in one chamber, they can pass this resolution that basically provides a disapproval of a rule that was finalized during the previous administration. So in this case, this action that the Senate passed this week would ensure that the rule proposed during the Trump administration that eliminated pollution standards for methane emissions from the oil and gas sector and eliminated all emission standards for the transmission and storage segments of that sector will have no force or effect. And it essentially reinstates the pollution reduction requirements established under the Clean Air Act in 2012 and 2016. And now that the Senate has passed this resolution, we turn to the House of Representatives, which is expected to vote on the resolution within the next couple weeks. And even with this incredibly exciting news from Congress, the White House, who had indicated their statement of support of this methane CRA resolution, named that really this will clear the pathway for the EPA to evaluate opportunities to not only promulgate even stronger standards under Section 111 of the Clean Air Act, in order to address, as we know, dangerous methane and other pollution from both new and existing sources across the oil and gas sector. And we at Sierra Club have been continuing to work with partners to advocate to the Biden administration that we must not only build upon the 2016 methane standards, but cut methane pollution from both new and existing oil and gas operations by 65% below 2012 levels in the next 5 years.
It's absolutely critical. And being in a state with oil and gas extraction, the methane emissions are one of the first steps that Colorado took back in 2014 to try and address the issues that were coming up for our communities, for air quality, for ozone impacts, and the bad air days that I referenced. It was one of the first steps that we took out here in 2014 was to regulate methane. So I'm glad to see that it's back on the table at the federal level. Now, thinking about building back fossil free, and we know that there's oil and gas infrastructure projects that threaten our communities. We've named a number of them. Y'all have named a number of them in the chat that you're working on in your communities. But what can President Biden do? How can President Biden act to stop these projects from moving forward? Does he have the authority to stop them?
Yes, absolutely. And, Indigenous leaders, including the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, they have led the fight against the Dakota Access Pipeline, calling on President Biden to shut down DAPL, just as he has done with KXL, the Keystone XL pipeline that you named, and that we're so excited that the president fulfilled his campaign promise to cancel that project on day one. So DAPL runs from the Bakken oil fields in North Dakota to Illinois via South Dakota and Iowa, where it connects to other pipeline systems, taking the oil to the Gulf. DAPL is currently operating without a legal easement, and the Corps has to prepare an environmental impact statement to inform whether to issue a new easement. But unfortunately, earlier this month, the Army Corps indicated they would not shut down DAPL, despite the ongoing threats it poses to the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, their drinking water, and the fact that it is illegally operating without a federal permit. And in the case with the Line 3 tar sands pipeline, as I referenced earlier, the Army Corps of Engineers during the Trump administration fast-tracked a Clean Water Act Section 404 permit. And Indigenous groups, climate activists are leading the fight against this project, with their opposition highlighting the significant threat of this tar sands oil that could spill, threatening precious water resources, wetlands, ancestral lands, and cultural resources. And as I said, more than 20 million people who drink the water downstream from the Mississippi River. President Biden can both direct the Army Corps to revoke Line 3's 404 permit and rescind the presidential permit for Line 3, just as he did for KXL. And Enbridge, which is the corporate polluter behind Line 3 with a demonstrated history of spills, is also trying to reroute its Line 5 pipeline, which runs beyond the Straits of Mackinac. And besides for these massive oil and tar sands pipeline projects, we then turn to out east with a massive frack gas pipeline, such as the Mountain Valley Pipeline, which consists of two segments, the 304-mile main line that is from West Virginia to Virginia, and then the 75-mile Southgate extension from Virginia to North Carolina. So MVP would harm endangered species habitats, national forests, clean water, communities along the pipeline route, and if completed, would be the same amount of greenhouse gas emissions as 37 coal-fired plants. It's 3 years behind schedule, over $3 billion over budget, fined millions of dollars in environmental violations, lacks multiple permits, and is still nowhere near complete. So President Biden has made a promise to take bold action to combat the climate crisis and has indicated his commitment to upholding environmental justice, honoring the rights and voices of Indigenous peoples. So as President Biden has already taken the first step by canceling the dangerous KXL pipeline, his work cannot stop there. We need President Biden to shut down and stop all of these pipelines once and for all.
Yes, we do. and it's time for the Biden administration to act. There are some links that have been shared in the chat for folks who are watching. Those links take you to actions that you can take right now with the Sierra Club, but that are a part of the actions that we're taking along with coalition partners all across the country to call on the Biden administration. You heard Mahiar mention the Army Corps of Engineers a number of times. That's one of the agencies that does some of the permitting, and the Biden administration can direct them to take the action that we need to protect our communities. I want to thank you, Mahiar, for all of the information that you shared with us and for all of the work that you're doing. I'm hoping that we'll have some time for questions at the end of our live stream, so hold those for now if you have them for Mahiar. But please do join me in the chat to give Mahiar our thanks for her time today. And thank you, Mahiar. And so we've talked a little bit about extraction. We've talked about some of the impacts around methane. We've talked about some of the pipelines that the Sierra Club and the Beyond Dirty Fuels team are fighting across the country with our partners and with Indigenous leadership at the forefront of many of those fights. And I want to turn now to what happens then and the place where the industry is proposing new markets for oil and gas, exporting it overseas. And the Sierra Club is part of a group of partners who's working hard to stop dozens of proposed terminals across the country. Many of them are located along the Texas and Louisiana Gulf Coast. And so with the expansion of oil and gas extraction, in one of the places I mentioned earlier, in the Permian Basin, in West Texas, eastern New Mexico, the industry is trying to find new markets in Europe, in Asia, around the globe, and has proposed massive export terminals here that would load the ships that would carry this oil and gas overseas. Now, this scheme is not only risky for our communities here, but it would export our climate pollution to other parts of the world. So I want to welcome our other panelists, Christopher and Josette. I want to invite them to join to tell you a little bit more about one community who is working hard to stop these export proposals. And hell yeah, they're winning. And I want to invite them to share about the impacts of the oil and gas industry in their community. And with that, I'll turn it over to the two of you.
Greetings and good day. I greet all my relatives. My name is Christopher Basaldu. I am a member of the Gariso Comecrudo tribe of Texas. We call ourselves Tokna, and our homelands we call Somisek. And I live in Brownsville, so-called Texas, near the Gulf, near the mouth of the Atmahalmetel, the Spirit River, also known as the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo. And I am happy to say that I know a lot of friends and relatives and members that have been trying to fight the 3 proposed LNG facilities for the Port of Brownsville, and one of which has canceled. So we won that. And I want to hand the mic over to my relative Josette so she can introduce herself also. And she's on mute for the moment. Oh. You want to say hello, Josette? Or I think she had a problem with coming off mute there for a moment. So when she comes back, we'll have an opportunity. Let's see. And is there also going to be showing you images? There we are, she's back.
Couldn't hear. I don't know what the heck happened. I guess my Wi-Fi or something.
That's okay. Please introduce yourself, Josette.
Hi, my name is Josette Hinojosa. I go by she, her. Those are my pronouns. I am a mom and a community organizer, activist here in Brownsville, Texas. Been working alongside Christopher for a couple of years now, and countless others down here who are also in resistance, against, these proposed LNG terminals and other environmental, they're environmental disasters that are, pending. But like we said earlier, there's like we did have a victory, so that's a good thing, and hopefully we could talk about that a little bit more later. But yes, I'm Josette, and I'm happy to be here with y'all.
Thank you, Josette. One of the things that we wanted to do was to just kind of be with y'all and tell you stories about what we're trying to fight against. Right now, as you see in the live stream, an image is a very brief sort of drone footage of the site area that would be used for Rio Grande LNG and near the port of Brownsville. That's showing you Bahia Grande. So that's a wetland area that's been restored over the years. It's used for fishing and recreation. It's beautiful. And these are the lands that would be marred, as you just saw, they would be marred by the development of any of these LNG facilities. So the natural beauty of the area is something that we want to have to enjoy, and also for future generations to enjoy. And as a Native and Indigenous person, all of these lands are part of our homelands, and they're sacred, and they carry the life of all of our other relatives, non-human relatives too, plants and animals and medicinal plants. And so we're trying to make sure, and like our relative an ocelot, an endangered species, we want to make sure that they have room to live, that they have space, that they have clean air, that they have clean water. And to be a good relative, to be a good human being, is making sure that all of this life has a chance to live. We as human beings don't have the right to destroy life or take it away from other living beings. And to be a good relative and a good human is to support the life of our relatives, human and non-human, the air and the water. And so we want to continue fighting against these proposed LNG facilities and their pipelines, their affiliated pipelines. We want to fight against fracking. Fracking is destructive and pollutes the water and destroys sacred sites. In that picture, you see people that were at the county commissioner's court, Cameron County Commissioner's Court, to ask for the commissioner's court to not give tax breaks to the Anova project. So Anova, Nova, and Anova, of course, is the LNG proposed facility that has pulled out and has canceled. And that has been because local people here, the Carrizo-Comecrudo tribe of Texas, partners like Sierra Club, and just people who want, residents who are concerned, have fought, and we won against that. But sometimes our county officials, and elected officials, they're in the pockets of industry. They want these projects to happen because they feel that there would be progress, and they're not seeing the bigger picture. That picture right there is when we were trying to stop or get the county commissioners to vote against the tax abatement. You can see the, a lot of us that turned out here in the community. We packed the house. The county commissioners tabled the vote. And in the 30 days till the next county meeting, the Anova LNG machine, the CEO and their PR company mounted a campaign and got people to show up, got other workers at the port to show up, they paid local people to show up and support Anova. And so the following month, Anova got their tax break, and that was October 2019. And we were very angry because the county commissioners could have voted when all the community was there and showed up, but they tabled the vote. And then the next month, Anova was there in force with their employees and their PR, and they got their tax break. And so now here we are months later, and with our resistance, Anova has pulled out. So we've got one LNG facility down out of 3 proposed and 2 more to go. So Josette, would you like to say some words too?
Yeah, I guess talking about that. Well, I guess when we think about Anova and just how like PR works, right? Because back in 2015, Anova actually in 2013, they had made plans to build this project, and in 2015, obviously the global market isn't good, but they thought that they'd be fully operational by 2020, and here we are in 2021. So, and this is what this is what they sent out like as a press release, like, oh, that they're going to be fully operational by 2020. So sometimes you really can't believe everything that you read, because a lot of the times they set out these press releases, but they ignore the fact that there is this large community resistance. And like Christopher said, here we are, like it's 2021. We set them back, and now here we are. That's one project down, and there's two more to keep resisting against. So yeah, it feels good to at least knock one of them out. But yeah, like definitely don't lose faith and don't lose hope. The fight is an uphill battle because we do have so much going against us. We have all this money, these people, they have, like Christopher mentioned, we had our community members who are not paid, who are just concerned citizens. Like myself, I'm a concerned mom. I think about future generations. I think about my children being able to play, out there and be able to see, the beauty that I get to see and be able to, continue that. And so there's just so many of us who have so much heart that are out there. But then you also got, we're up against these people who have the resources to be able to pay other people to just sit there and, pretend to be part of, their movement, but they're really just getting paid. But, and being there that day, I remember I saw an old friend from school, and I was like, hey, like, how are you? Like, what are you doing? She's like, oh, well, they're paying me to be here. And I'm like, but do you know why you're here? And so I actually got to sit there and chit chat with her for a little bit. But you see, don't feel like discouraged. Don't feel like you can't do this. There was only, it wasn't, I guess, we've been doing this for like 6 years, and sometimes it can be kind of overwhelming, and you can feel like you're the only ones, and like you're like, well, we're just this small group of people. But in all honesty, it can be done, and like we're proving that it can be done with a lot of love and heart and determination, and we can get things done, and we can truly move mountains when we work together. And honestly, I'm just, I'm just happy to be here in resistance with y'all, and to be sharing this experience and this victory with y'all, because this is a victory for not just us, but this is a victory for everyone as a collective, because we're all just trying to take care of our little piece of Mother Earth, like as best as we can, and save what we can. So this is a big win for all of us.
Right. And for people who lived in this part of the world down here in what's called the Rio Grande Valley, we have a lot of deep emotion and connection to the entire landscape, being able to drive out to the coastline or be able to get out to the coastline and even just sit, listen to the sound of waves of birds, observe everything. It's a beauty that sometimes we don't talk about how much we appreciate it. But I think perhaps for us down here, the more we talk about it, the more we'll know, the more we connect with each other and with our place, the more we'll understand what would be lost or what could be lost if we allow industry to take whatever it wants. And industries doesn't give a thought to what human beings need or what they want in their lives. They just want to make money. And sadly, even a lot of elected officials are more concerned about what potential money they think they can make, as opposed to making decisions that are good for all the people. And then on top of that, a lot of the problems here in the Rio Grande Valley with border militarization, with the dehumanization of human beings who are just seeking either life, resources, food, the hyper privatization of land, and also the just deforestation and removing land from life or from livelihood. All of these issues are very difficult to take, and it does seem overwhelming sometimes. And we encourage each other, like Josette says, we encourage each other to keep resisting, because deep down we know what's right, and we want to make sure that we can provide a life that's good for everybody, not just a few rich people who live out of state or live in some other part of the world. We want to make a life that's enjoyable and just for everyone here. And I also want to say something about sort of the international perspective. Is a lot of the people that the people that work here in Brownsville against these facilities, we've been trying to get banks and international banks to divest from these projects. That's part of our what we would try to do, because this fracked gas, this destructive gas, these are export terminals. The gas is going to be exported to the global market into other countries. And so there's destruction of land, native lands even, in order to produce this commodity that's getting transferred over to markets in Europe or other parts of the world for their comfort. That's literally colonization, destroying native lands for the comfort of Europe. And so our resistance is not only local, but it has to also be international. And we have been keeping an eye on international targets and tactics, and that's what we've been doing as well. And I'm just really happy to be a part of people who have that broader vision and know that we are acting locally and we're acting globally. Do you want to add anything more, Josette?
Just a big thank you to all those allies that we have internationally too, because I think it's amazing that we can all come together, and technology sometimes stinks, but it serves its purpose when you're trying to like organize and trying to communicate with other people and talk about these kinds of victories and stuff like that. But yeah, I definitely huge thank you to our allies, our international allies, for helping us along the way and being instrumental in this victory as well. Yeah.
Right on, Josette. Right. And I've kind of lost track of time myself. I don't know if we have any more time.
I think we're supposed to do Q&A, right? Or something. Take some questions.
Right. We want to make sure that we leave time open for questions if there are any.
Yeah.
Right.
Josette, Christopher, thank you so very much. Would you like us to show the video?
Again, sure. Did it not show already when we first started talking, the really short, brief drone video? Or do you want to show
the
it again?
drone video showed, but there is a great one that features Josette calling on
right.
action
Yes,
from
that one.
banks.
Yes.
Should we roll
definitely.
that now and then we'll go into Q&A? Wonderful.
Okay.
All right.
Definitely.
Well, I will let our tech folks know to roll.
Foreign investors are funding a fracked gas project in the Rio Grande Valley that would pollute our air, damage the environment, and endanger the health of our community.
Macquarie Bank is an Australian bank that is advising the Rio Grande LNG export terminal, which is proposed for the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas.
Rio Grande LNG would be an environmental disaster. The fracked gas project would pollute our community's air, water, and land. It would destroy plant and wildlife habitats, including the endangered ocelot.
Burning fossil fuels like frack gas adds to carbon emissions and contributes to climate change and ever-growing climate catastrophe.
At last year's annual shareholders meeting, the president of Macquarie Bank, Peter Warren, committed publicly to meeting with Brownsville community members and the Carrizo Come Crudo tribe of Texas.
Can the bank show moral leadership and denounce Rio Grande LNG so the project does not go forward? And can Macquarie Bank meet with me and other residents that have concerns about the Rio Grande LNG project?
Well, as Shamara has just mentioned, we certainly have requested our people in the US and the promoters of this project to meet with the local people. If you could send me some information, and then I will endeavour to ensure that that takes place.
But he did not honor the commitment, instead quietly telling local community members and the original native people of the land that he refused to meet with them over email.
This indicates a flagrant disregard for Native and Indigenous people, people of color, and the community that would be harmed by their investment in the Rio Grande LNG.
So we are asking again, will Macquarie Bank meet with impacted communities, the people of the land, to discuss this project?
Thank you. Josette and Christopher, do you want to add anything after the video here as we get ready to wrap up the presentation and take questions?
Yeah, I believe that if anything, I don't know if there was a Google toolkit that might have been available to be able to have like a call to action for that, to share the video after. But yeah, that's what we're trying to do, is to demand that the bank meet with us. So we're still working on that, and so that's still part of our action and our plans to try to get people to be able to pressure the bank. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know.
And also stay tuned, everybody, because our allies and accomplices, our partnerships over in Australia, who are fighting fossil fuel industry and who are resisting Macquarie Bank. There may be a webinar that we're going to do collectively to continue the pressure on Macquarie Bank to divest from the Rio Grande LNG project. So we haven't set a time for that yet, but we're working on it.
Wonderful. Well, we will stay tuned, and that toolkit was just shared in the comments. Folks have seen that we've had a number of different actions shared in the comments, and would really encourage everyone who is tuning in, whether it's live right now or you watch this after the fact, to join us in taking action. Josette, Christopher, congratulations on stopping Anova LNG, on all of the work that you've done, on the movement that you all have been a part of building. And I am so grateful to the work that you have done thus far, and I can't wait to see what you're able to accomplish next. Building community, having the heart, standing up for the future, this is what it's all about. This is what we're here for. This is what the folks tuning in who are working on oil and gas issues in their communities are feeling with you. I'm feeling this with you right now. And I just want to thank you for being here and for speaking so eloquently and so honestly about the reality of what it looks like to fight these projects for years.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
Absolutely. So with that, it looks like there's a couple questions. Could we bring Mahiar back on the screen with us, and we will see what questions we have in the chat. Welcome back, Mahiar. So it looks like there is a request for some help on a project that's being fought in Western New York. There's a frack gas pipeline in New York, and we have somebody who's looking for somebody that they can connect with. So I can speak to that person directly, and would actually love to connect with you and to hear more. So if you're fighting in your community and you want to be connected with somebody at the Sierra Club, we will get information into the chat about what the email address that you can send a general inquiry to, and I'll make sure that those get directed to me and out to our staff and our team, so that we can help you with the fight that you're engaged on, learn more about this. But one of the things that I want to share is that we have local chapters of the Sierra Club across the country. Many of you are probably members and supporters of those chapters. That's another avenue that you can go. So there's a lot of us who can help with the fight, and we would love to hear about the way that you're fighting oil and gas in your community. And we have a question in here that I would love for each of you to speak to if you feel so moved. But how can folks help? How can they help with the fights that you mentioned? How can we get further along as a collective community? What can they do right now?
Well, I have some encouragement for anybody who feels like what they can do. Try to look through your local presses where you live. Look through your local press and media first, and try to do searches about pipelines, about gas pipelines, oil pipelines, LNG. Look for those sort of keywords and see if they come up in your local media, and that would be one of like the one of the second steps to like look through and just start gathering intelligence on what you think it should be. Another step would be if you find information about local groups of people who are trying to either fight pipelines or fight um, fracking. Also, another danger with the technology, the so-called technology of fracking, it produces a lot of very toxic wastewater. They take they take pure, clean drinking groundwater, add chemicals to it, do the fracking process, and then what's left over is wastewater. You can look for keywords like produced water as well in your local areas and see if there's discussions happening by your elected officials or city councils or by industry. And as a native person, I'd say your first step is do a little research and see whose land you live on and whose land you occupy. And if you're, I mean, it's all native land, and America is all stolen land. So you're on somebody's land, and that may actually help you if you connect with local tribes who are, if they're fighting in the same fight, then you can join their leadership and follow their lead in how they're fighting these projects as well. Those are three major steps that people can do soon, very fast.
Mahiar, Josette, would you like to add anything on that one?
Sure, I can just jump in a little from the federal policy side. So, super plus to everything Christopher named, and I think just to add is whatever you can do to make your voices heard with your elected officials, not only locally with your state representatives, your city council, but also your federal government. You know, when I am advocating and lobbying for all of these issues that we've named to members of Congress, to the Biden administration, my voice is not powerful enough unless it has the voices of all of you and the voices of the community all across the country behind me. That's how we win, is from the power of the grassroots, in complementary to the work that we're doing advocating for these issues here in Congress and with the Biden administration. So please get involved. It's incredibly important, and appreciate all the work that folks all already doing to get involved locally and nationally.
Thank you. So one of the things that we've shared in the chat are all of the different ways folks can take action. I want to let folks know that by taking action with the Sierra Club, you become a part of our community of action takers. And those are the folks that we let know first about the issues that we're working on and additional ways that you can get involved. So with taking action today, you're signing up for working with us going forward. And it's an exciting moment to be a part of this work at the Sierra Club. We have an administration who is taking strides in the right direction, though we know that there is a lot more that they need to do. And we are calling on them in multiple ways that you've seen in the comments here, that you've heard from our panelists, but there's many, many other pieces of the work that Sierra Club is doing. There are some questions in the chat about whether or not in Pennsylvania or across the country, Sierra Club is working against some of the large industrial developments that are proposed for that area around ethane. And there's also some questions about what do we do knowing that many of us do use fossil fuels right now, today, in our homes, in our transportation, in other personal uses that we have, or in the places that we go to work. What do we do in order to move forward from here and ensure that we get to the future that we want? So if you have any thoughts on some of the other things that the Sierra Club is working on that you want to share, or what do we do as folks who care deeply about these issues and also live with oil and gas in our communities, or that we're using right now as we work towards the vision that we want. Does anybody want to speak to any of those questions?
I can share just really quickly on the ethane issue. We are working on trying to stop not only ethane cracker facilities, but the build out of the petrochemical industry that is perpetuating the climate crisis. Not only are they receiving subsidies from the federal government, but also perpetuating the climate crisis on many communities, not only those in Pittsburgh, but really all across the Appalachian region and many others across the country. So all of these fights are connected, and we are keeping an eye on it. And I would say, you know, more broadly on the what do we do with the issue of current usage of oil and gas. It's not about saying that, you know, we want to shut off all the lights or no one can drive cars anymore. You know, that's not the issue that we're talking about today. We're talking about stopping the further build out and expansion of the fossil fuel industry. With the current case of demand for both oil and gas, there is no more need to build new projects. What we need to be doing is further investing in renewable energy, clean renewable energy, building off of electrification, transportation infrastructure, and move to a managed decline from the current industry that is in the oil and gas industry. And so when we talk about like building massive tar sands pipelines or export terminals, we have export terminals because we're exporting that gas and oil overseas. So we're not even using it here in the United States, which is honestly just ridiculous. And so anyway, I'll stop there and just say that I think for us, we're envisioning a world where we make those massive investments in energy that moves us forward and allows us to stay below the IPCC and staying 1.5 degrees Celsius, which right now, unfortunately, we're well on our way to not reach those goals. And so it's a huge problem.
Thanks, Mahiar. Does anybody want to add more, or shall we go to some closing remarks?
I like what Mahir had to say, and I think in Texas, like, we have the ability to go green. You know, particularly down here in the RGV, or, you know, the Rio Grande Valley. We don't need billionaires to try to come and save us. We have the technology here, and so that, you know, and again, it's not to like demonize anybody that's within the oil and gas industry either. But we have to start looking and imagining a future where we're going to wean them off and we're going to transition into something that's going to be better and that's going to work for us and with us and not try to kill us. So I guess I just wanted to piggyback on what you had to say because I think it was, you know, but I see that, I mean, we live in Texas and it's a really, you know, y'all know what we have here. It's oil and gas, and that's what, you know, but is there potential? Do we rank like 9th in the nation for, you know, solar and wind? Yes, like there's potential here. We just need to really be able to stop living in that mind of despair. Well, no, we can't do this, and just recognize that yes, we can, and it can be done. We just, you know, we just have to fight for it a little harder here in Texas. But yeah, it can definitely be done, and I think that's what our vision is here for the Valley, and that's what we're hoping to do specifically here in Brownsville. I know that, you know, that's what we're definitely hoping will be our future, and hopefully we can lead the way and lead by example if we are able to do that. And so, yeah.
Thank you. And as we wrap up here, would love if you have one thing you want to share that's giving you a little bit of hope right now, right? These fights are long and they are hard, but as Josette said earlier, we have heart. And so what is giving you hope right now in the work that you're doing? How can you share a little bit of hope with the folks who have tuned in as they go back to their days and their communities and the work that they're all doing? And I'll share, for me, what gives me hope is the young people who are a part of this movement. I tuned in at the beginning of the month when a group of Indigenous youth runners headed to Washington, D.C. to call on President Biden to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline, and listening to their voices loud and clear in the streets of Washington, D.C., calling on the president to act. They gave me hope.
I guess I can jump in quickly. You know, what gives me hope is the prospect of us being able to raise our voices and be out in the streets together in the coming months, or hopefully in the next year ahead with vaccines. I think, you know, as I said, my work here in DC is not complete unless it comes with the power of folks all across the country. And so I know we've been living in this virtual world, but I look forward to hopefully turning that virtual world in person again, and getting out there and fighting hard for these issues.
Do you want to go, Josette?
I guess so. I guess what gives me hope for sure is like just I spent this full moon out at Boca Chica Beach, and I watched the sunset, and I think being out there, being so close to the river where the river meets the Gulf, and just knowing that, you know, and learning this past year through the Carizo tribe and through Christopher that all life started at the river, and that gives me so much hope, is that this river still flows out into the water. It still provides life to these animals and to the plants that are native to this area. And so looking at that is a big reminder of why it is that we fight in the first place. And that gives me hope. That gives me hope.
Yeah, you know, these industries are leading down a road that might lead to our destruction and the destruction of many different life forms on the planet. And so my hope is that is knowing that human beings can remember what it means to be full human, and that is to support and give life and support the life of our relatives, human and non-human, the air, the water, the land, the plants, the animals, medicinal plants, everything. And in our language, we say, when we lead each other, we say "ayama," which means give life. And what it means to be fully human is to give life, not the opposite of giving life, but to give life.
Thank you. You all sharing, you all being here, those of you who have joined us from across the country, you are giving us life right now. And thank you for doing that and for being here and for building this community. May we all go forth into our work and our days and continue to build something amazing together. With that, we'll leave you. Thank you.
Ayama.